in 3, 2, 1. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is McKaylee. I work at Tattered Cover Bookstore. And first and foremost, I want to say thank you. Thank you for supporting local independent bookstores. Thank you for shopping locally. It helps us more than you will ever know. You've supported us over the last year and the last 50 years, as it is Tattered Cover's 50th anniversary in 2021. And we would not be here without our community, both virtually and in person, which hopefully we'll get to do later this year. But for now, thank you for being a part of our virtual community. So before I go any further, I want to let you know that closed captioning is enabled on this video for those who might want it or need it. There's a black bar at the bottom of the screen with a button labeled CC on it. If you click that button, closed captioning is enabled should you want it or need it. And for those of you who may be joining us who've never heard of Tattered Cover Bookstore is a local independent bookshop in Denver, Colorado. We have 4 locations in the Denver metro area, soon to be 5, which is incredible. We have a brand new all children's location opening up later this summer. And the best way to get updates about that and all of our other amazing info that we've got going on here is by signing up for our email newsletter or following us on social media. And so right now you can still come and visit the stores that we do have open as long as you're wearing your mask over your mouth and your nose, despite the CDC regulations due to having a young population base and families. We have chosen to keep our staffs and our customers safe by mandating masks when you come into the store. So we thank you for adhering to that policy. If you want to, you can always shop online at tatteredcover.com. That's open 24/7. You can shop in your pajamas to your heart's content and get all of your bookish needs. And also on tatteredcover.com is our events. And oh my gosh, we have so many. And I would know because I'm running 99.9% of them. So I want to thank you guys for supporting us that way. But there's so many more coming up. Like just next Tuesday, we're celebrating the release of Susan Mallory's newest book, The Stepsisters, and she's going to be in conversation with Robin Carr. Like I said, that's Tuesday the 25th. And so you can get tickets for that online at tatteredcover.com. But now I want to talk about the 2 incredible authors that we have here tonight. We have Delia Owens, who is the author of Where the Crawdads Sing, and we are celebrating Mary Alice Monroe, newest book, The Summer of Lost and Found. So a couple of things about our amazing authors here. Delia Owens is the co-author of 3 internationally best-selling nonfiction books about her life as a wildlife scientist in Africa. She holds a BS in zoology from the University of Georgia and a PhD in animal behavior from the University of California at Davis. She's won the John Burroughs Award for Nature Writing and has been published in Nature, the African Journal of Ecology, and International Wildlife, among many others. She lives in the mountains of North Carolina, and Where the Crawdads Sing is her first novel, later going to be turned into a movie, which we'll probably talk about. We already were doing it beforehand. And then our author of the hour here, we have Mary Alice Monroe. She's the New York Times bestselling author of 27 books, including her newest novel, The Summer of Lost and Found, and her first middle grade book, The Islanders. Monroe's books have been published worldwide. She's earned numerous accolades and awards, including induction into the South Carolina Academy Authors Hall of Fame, the Southwest Florida Author Distinction Award, the South Carolina Award for Literary Excellence, the RT Lifetime Achievement Award, the International Book Award for Green Fiction, the Southern Book Prize for Fiction as well. Her best-selling novel, The Beach House, is also a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie. She's the co-founder of the hit web show and podcast Friends in Fiction, an active conservationist. Wow, my reading kicked in there. She lives in Low County of South Carolina. You can visit her at maryalicemonroe.com. But right now she's with us here today, and I'm going to change over my camera and unmute these lovely ladies so we can talk to them about the latest book. Hello, the pair of you.
Hi. Oh, that was fun. You have so much energy. It's just
thanks. That's the theater degree coming into work there.
There you are.
Well, I'm so excited to hear the 2 of you talk. I want to let our audience know we do have a Q&A session that we're going to do later that some of you have already been active in the chat. So that's where you can ask your questions for either Mary Alice or Delia. And for now, I will hand the show over to you.
Thank you. Hey, Delia.
Hey, this is so great.
I wish it was in person.
I know.
And a glass of wine.
Mary Alice and I are good friends, and we haven't been able to see each other for a year, of course, like many good friends. But we've been doing some Zooming over this time. So you are done.
This is going to be a good one. Last time I froze on Delia all the time. So she promised me she was going to try not to freeze because I froze.
So
good
this will
to
be
see
fun.
you.
We'll start out by asking some questions, and I just wanted to start by saying that a lot of authors have said that during the pandemic they sort of froze up. They felt that there was a lot of time to write, but they were lacking in inspiration to write. But not you. Nothing seems to stop you. You just always seem to be able to write, which is so wonderful. And we all benefit from that. But did you feel at all uninspired during the pandemic, or how did you feel about writing during the pandemic?
That's a good question, because I think a lot of us, I did have COVID brain at the beginning. I had COVID, so afterwards I had COVID brain. I think for me, though, what really happened was I couldn't travel. I was going to go out and do some research for some other species that I was interested in. And of course, like everybody else, I was stuck at home. And I was actually up in North Carolina, so close to you, Delia. The two could see each other. And I really thought about it, but not for such a long time, because it occurred to me that I was in a unique situation. This was a period in history, like a war, that I really at the time sensed my intuition was tingling. We're going to go back and look at this time as like we did, where were you when JFK was shot? Where were you when the Twin Towers fell? Where were you in the pandemic of 2020? It's going to be that kind of a historic time. And I thought, I'm not interested in the illness itself. I was really interested in setting a book against this framework, because it is like a wartime with heightened emotions, and it does challenge interpersonal relationships. And I thought, the species I'm going to study this time is the human species, which you'll appreciate because you study species all the time. And it was a great idea, but it was hard to execute.
Right.
It was absolutely the hardest book I ever wrote, because I have a really strong sense of story structure when I begin a book. I have a method I began 20 years ago where I do an academic research. I talk to experts about the species, that's the backdrop. And then I work with the wildlife, and then I come back. And when I'm done, this could last for a couple of years. And then when I pull all of it together, I go, okay, there's a story in there. I'm going to find it. I like to see the animal tells you the story. And right. Yeah. So, and they do, as you know, so
they always do.
They always do. And that was my process for 20 years, but I couldn't do that in 2020 because I was writing this book in real time. And if I had known how hard it was, I may have backed away, but I couldn't. I was in it. But what I thought the book was about changed from April to June to August to November. And then by the time it was December, I hardly had any hair left from pulling it out. And it was a roller coaster of emotions. It was hard for me to get a grasp, but I did it.
You did it. You did it.
I did it. Yeah.
You did it. And now I know what you mean by real time. You were writing about the pandemic in the pandemic.
Real time. And so
it was about people in the pandemic, yes, and how it affected them, and you were being affected by it.
It was a roller coaster. It was a real roller coaster. And I think I suffered in some ways, but in other ways, because I was paying attention so much, I think it really challenged my powers of observation. Oh. And it helped me create the characters in a real way, but it also helped me understand for myself, a little self-discovery, a little, I think for all of us transformed a little bit from this experience.
Well, I want to get back to that, but I want to remember to get back to that. I'm not an interviewer usually, so I might forget.
But that's okay. We'll find our way.
The Beach House series now is almost 20 years old.
Yes.
And I'm just fascinated there must be some great advantages to writing a series. And one is that the characters are already developed.
Yes.
Well, you don't have to develop them in every book, and the readers already know them. Your readers know them.
Yeah.
So you start halfway around down the football field when you start.
You catch it. You catch those characters. But
in this book, you're moving on to the next generation. Yes. But you've done, so it was, how did you feel about that? Do you feel like, you must feel like you know these characters really well.
It was a combination of yes and no. 20 years over the last 20, can you believe 20 years? That's a long time. I'm 20 years older, and I grew up with Kara. She was 40 in the book. We're both about the same age. And then I was a little older, but so she went from coming home to Isle of Palms. I live in the Low Country, for those of you in this area. That's a part of South Carolina, and it is literally a low part of the landscape and on the coast. And it has a lot of rich lore of Charleston history, and it's got a lot of the Gullah history, and it's just rich with landscape beauty and animals, and it's just a great place to live. So I put these characters from Charleston, the Rutledge family from Charleston, an old historic family, but this woman was an abused housewife and socialite. The only place she loved and felt herself was in the cottage, Primrose Cottage on the beach. And she tended turtles. Back in the day, they called them turtle ladies. But I am, as you know, Delia, a turtle.
You are a turtle lady.
For 22 years. Woohoo, still counting. And we've had our first nest. Yes, we've had our first nest. So that's good. But anyway, I set her here, and there was a dynamic woman at 40 who didn't want to get married, forgot to have children, that kind of a career woman, and her mother's last summer. And throughout that story, it's a reconciliation novel, and the backdrop was these sea turtles. And then for the next 20 years, whenever I wrote other standalone novels, but whenever I had something to say about my beach, whether it was dolphins or pelicans or shorebirds, I brought back to this particular family as they grew older. So all the Kara's now 60, almost 60. Linnea, the next generation, she was 8 years old in the first book. Now she's like 26, 27. So I know them, but I know Kara. Kara could come have dinner. I know what she'd order. I know what she'd put in her cart. I know her so well. But the next generation, that's my subtitle for this book. Star Trek took it, The Next Generation. They are young and exciting, and yet I had to get to know them.
Yeah, starting with the love stories go on. And
you got to have, my goodness, in your 20s, there are love stories. And I just really enjoyed thinking. In fact, that's why I chose this family, Delia, is because I said, if I was going to talk about families and interpersonal relationships in this time of 2020, the year like no other, I'm going to use this family that I know so well and that my readers know so well.
Yes, and the readers will be able to see how they were affected. And they'll be identified, because a lot of people were affected the same way.
And I think some people thought, oh gosh, I'm not sure I want to read about the pandemic, but the pandemic is the setting. It's just like the sea turtles might be a setting, a backdrop. What goes on is the relationship with all the people. And that's what interested me as the writer.
So how did you tell us what was behind the paper airplanes?
Oh, thank you.
I don't want you to give anything away, but that was really.
Yeah, I loved the paper airplanes for two reasons. One, do you remember the movie Forrest Gump when they had the little feather and the feather? Yes. I loved it because it was a note, or the bee. It's a note that says to everybody, "There's serendipity here. Mm-hmm. There's a little whimsy here. Mm-hmm. So be prepared for for the fun too." And so when the story is set up, when Linnea is working at the South Carolina Aquarium, opening of the book, and she's furloughed, and a lot of young people, everybody was furloughed and laid off, lost jobs. So she comes back to the beach house where she rents from her Aunt Kara, the woman who's been in the book for all these years. And she's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm don't have an income. And Kara comes over and says, how is your savings? There aren't any. You know what I earn. You don't earn a lot with animal welfare. And so she said, don't worry about it. That was the legacy of the beach house, which I think came through as a theme. Don't worry about it. That's what we do. We take care of women.
That happened to Kara as well.
Exactly.
So
it happened.
Yes, right.
Yeah. And that's the legacy of the beach house. And she told Linnea, we pay it forward. We're fortunate you have your family. We pay it forward. So Linnea takes that to heart. And she thinks, okay, this is my legacy now. So she opens the door to a roommate, a woman who has kind of a tense relationship. Her brother, who comes home from England, who is studying at Oxford. And the last thing he wants to do is live with mom and dad. So he says, you've got to let me live with you. And then the triangle begins. We're getting to the paper airplanes. Her old boyfriend that broke her heart and left for California was visiting his mother, and he found out someone was sick in the area, and he put himself in quarantine. And I think the big issue that a lot of us will remember is the issue of quarantine in the pandemic. Right. I went out and someone I know got sick. I'm going to go into quarantine just to be safe. That whole, I am sick, you go into quarantine. So that was a really big deal. So he goes into quarantine next door. And then her boyfriend is coming from England and he's trying to get in. So you have this triangle. And she goes up and she sees this man in the carriage house window and she knows it's John. And she's like, oh, what's he doing here? Because he broke her heart. Yeah. And he shoots an airplane down from the second floor. And that's that sense of whimsy. And there's poetry and stories. Then the little girl comes to live with them. And of course, she's fascinated with paper airplanes. And the whole connection between them was that little bit of ethereal je ne sais quoi, between them. And
then a lot can happen, even in a pandemic. A lot of good things can happen.
Yeah, and there were some scary parts, but I think overall, I wanted people to think it was beautiful moments too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And another thing that it just struck a chord with me is the older Flo.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up.
And
yeah.
I didn't know if you remembered, but in Jane Goodall's studies of chimpanzees in Tanzania, her oldest female that she knew the longest and wrote the most about name was Flo.
I did not remember that.
And she followed Flo until she had her last offspring, which was a young male, and the relationship of the older female in the family and what that meant. And so Flo reminds me.
Oh, what a perfect, and of course you would think of that. What a perfect analogy, because Flo was a very dear character to this family. This unmarried woman who was very strong and feisty has been slipping in the last 20 years into financial concerns, but also, as she aged, Alzheimer's. And that's a big issue for a lot of family. And Delia, when I was up in that mountain house, not being able to see you, I did have my sisters come.
Right.
And, remember? And I think that was where I was living life about bringing people into the house like Linnea brought people into the house. So I was kind of living in real time and writing about what I was experiencing. And I had one sister from Chicago and she was, locked in a condo. I said, come to the mountains.
Right.
And then my sister in LA, come to the mountains. And then the young niece.
So you filled your house during the pandemic.
I did, just like Linnea did the beach house. And there were good moments, the Camelot moments, I called them. You look back on it and you think, when else could we have lived together? And
that's true. It probably wouldn't have happened without the pandemic.
No, you can't just say, I'm going to not work for 3 months.
Sorry, I'm too busy for that.
That's right. So it offered up lots of families. We're like, my kids came to live with their parents, or my kids from Chicago came to live in my beach house here. And they got to spend the whole summer here where they never got to do that. So I look at that as, I was trying to write about those good moments too.
Well, that is so great that you found some good part, you filled it up with love.
I wanted the book to be inspiring, I think, in the end.
And then I think you've answered the question I asked before of how you were inspired. You were inspired because of all the things you put together during the pandemic. You had family around, you had people around, you filled up your house. I think that probably was inspiring.
When you went, I know you have a cat.
I have a cat, but pretty much a lot of us.
But you had
He's a big cat. He fills up my house.
He is a big cat. But you had close friends nearby that you had.
Close friends, and we were all very careful. We were able to meet out in the mountains, like at picnic spread, sitting far apart. So I had that, but
which is good.
Yes, but I wasn't able to see any of my family, or so it was hard on a lot of people. But I think that I love the way that the book your book parallels what you were doing, and that's what and that was the real time thing again. I hate to pin you down on this, but what was your favorite scene in the book?
My favorite scene.
It's hard not to give things away with that.
Well, there's some funny scenes. I love that scene when she was told this is your legacy. But I think the one that I wrote it at the last minute. I knew I had to get some turtles in there because it was turtle season. And it was Linnea's, you see a triangle and she's really struggling, but I think she was losing herself because she's trying to give to the roommates, give to the, try to be fair to Gordon, being fair to John, being fair to everybody. And she was kind of beginning to crumble a little bit under the weight of it. And I think a lot of women just give all the time, and then all of a sudden they're dried up. They need to recharge batteries. And she was sitting on the beach towards the end, and I won't give away spoilers, but it's that time that I love the most when you're on the beach at night, and the tide was way out. And it was a dark, velvety black night, and you couldn't see the ocean, but you can hear it.
You hear it, right.
And then, at night when it's like midnight, you've been outdoors a lot. And so at midnight, when it gets the air gets a little chillier, and it's quiet. It's a different kind of quiet. And so Kara and Linnea are sitting on the beach at this time, and there's a camaraderie or a confession time. And that's when Linnea just said, I don't know what to do, and I feel like I'm lost. And that's when her mentor, her aunt Kara, said, being selfish is a good thing. The word self, you have to take care of yourself. And you can't give if you don't watch out for your own needs. And that helped reshape Linnea's decision for the next step. And I think in the end, ultimately, it was my come to Jesus as well, where I realized it was a hard year for a lot of us, but it was the end good. But towards the end, Eckhart Tolle writes all the time, and I read him many, many years, about living each moment, living each day to the fullest. And I never got it. I was, oh, sure, I get the words, I get the concept, but I was always, I've got book tour, I've got my next deadline, I've got whatever, always the future. And in this book, I realized you don't necessarily plan for the future because you don't know what's going to happen. And I think because of that, for me and my characters, I really understood what it meant to calm down and live today. And just enjoy. Like I'm so enjoying talking to you. I really am. It's the only way we talk. But we're here.
We're here.
We're here.
And we have to enjoy this, even during a pandemic. Find the beach. Find that special place on the beach.
Yeah. Find that place, your happy place. Even if it's in here. Yeah. Even if it's your backyard.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Or with a special friend.
With a special friend. And also, the exotic animals that you've studied so much in your book, in your life, and have written about. I just wanted people to say, what's exotic in your own backyard? What's at the bird feeder? Do you know the names of those birds? Or that Jeremiah and the bullfrog?
I knew lions for years.
Yes.
I knew them by name. I knew elephants, and then in Idaho, I lived in Idaho. I knew the deer. I did 4 generations of the deer and their young, and the elk, and the bears.
So you knew it was your neighborhood.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
That's what I mean. And that's why you love it so much. Is because you
They
knew
were
it.
my family for years and years and years.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
But that's another thing I like very much about your books, and that is that you always have a conservation message, but your messaging is soft.
Thank you.
No one, and that's what I co-authored my 3 books on our research in Africa, and we were very careful. No one wants to sit down and to be preached to about the conservation.
Yeah, none of this. Yeah.
But no one wants to sit and read a book. They finally got to the evening. They want to sit and enjoy it by the fire or out on the beach and read a book. And they don't want to be preached to. And you do a very good job of getting the conservation message in there in story form without people feeling, all tied up and nervous and upset about it. And
it is hard to do. Let me return the compliment.
Thank you.
Where the crawdancing, I think one of the things that, before I met you, I fell in love with your book, and I really was there in the marsh and heard the character's sense of detail was teaching us about her location without hitting us over the head with it, because it was through the character's viewpoint. It's what mattered to her. And there was a reason that she cared about everything. So I think when you present it through the heart and soul of a character, it comes alive for the reader. And that's what I think is so great about Where the Crawdancing, is that we were in the marsh with her and we knew why everything mattered so much to her. She was gifted as well.
Yes.
Which, by the way,
we talk about
my light.
we talk about Mother Nature, but in Crawdads, the marsh represented nature, and the marsh was her mother.
Yes,
and,
yes.
And that's the point in any book that has even a tiny thread of conservation in it, is that nature is our mother, and we need to take care of her for that reason. But it's just go softly with it. Yeah, the sun's not on your face.
I know. I'm tempted to jump up and close the shade. We're having sunset. Okay, hold on. Hold on.
Don't disappear. This is the Zoom world. And in fact, I wanted to ask you. I mean, you're doing all of this entire.
We're back.
Oh, I forgot you couldn't hear me. Okay, I kept right on talking as though you could hear me.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Before we run out of time, I'm dying to know. I love your book. I think everyone who's read your book loves the book. So what's going on with the movie? Everyone, she just came back from the set.
Oh, it's so exciting. They Reese Witherspoon is producing the movie. She's not acting it, she's producing it, and with Sony Pictures. And they're filming it in the very rich and diverse marshes of Louisiana. And oh my gosh, to go there and see the Chase, the young man Chase, and Kaya, and Tate, the 3 main characters, to see them on the beach by the fire, to see the little, of course they had to have a young Kaya.
Yeah.
Play the younger role before Kaya was older, and to see her actually get into that little Pa's boat and crank it all by herself and crank the motor for the first time, and the boat takes off, and she really does it. I mean, the settings are so beautiful, just like I imagine, with the cypress trees and the Spanish moss and the old shack. It's beautiful.
Did you get a little teary?
I cried a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I remember too when I went to the beach house. I got on the beach and they're making the film, and the very first scene I saw was the women around the nest as it was erupting. And it's because it was seeing your words come alive, your story come alive. It's a magical moment.
It's a magical moment. It really is.
We're both very fortunate. Yeah.
We are very fortunate.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate to have you as a friend.
I'm very fortunate to have you as a friend.
But you've done this entire book. This is the first, I don't know, knowing you, this is probably not the first one. Have you promoted 2 books during the pandemic?
Oh,
3.
and I say, Delia, it's highly unusual. But I wrote, there's an anthology. Dorothea Benton Frank was a beloved author in the Low Country, and she died very young. And we wanted to write a goodbye and to honor her. So Reunion Beach was created, and it was her editor, Carrie Farron from Harper, who asked us, her best friends. So it's me and Ellen Hildebrand and Patty Callahan and Adriana Trigiani. And we all wrote a short story.
Oh, nice.
And centered around a beach scene. That's what we were asked to do. And her family contributed. It's a beautiful anthology. So that came out in April. And then I didn't have to do much for that. I'm the heart writing a short story. It reminded me what Mark Twain said about, I would have written, what was it? How difficult it was to write short. True story. Then
I just refuse. I'd rather write a novel than an essay.
I think for me, oh my gosh, I've been writing so many essays in the last 6 months.
I just refuse. I don't write essays.
Don't never say never. And then my middle grade book. And that's, Delia, I've been wanting to do that for so long.
You've been talking about that for some time. I'm so glad you did it.
But it's been 2.5 years in the making. Mm-hmm. So it's not, it's finally coming out, but it's coming out June 15th, called The Islanders, by the way. And it's that middle grade age is when those kids, Delia, they think they can change the world. These are the stewards of tomorrow. These are the ones who are going to make it happen. And I wanted kids, Marcus, have you met Marcus, my husband? I don't think you have.
No, I haven't.
No, he's a child psychiatrist. Yeah, I don't see him much. I've been
You mean you have a husband? I didn't know you had a husband. I knew you had a dog. I don't believe Marcus exists. I'm sorry. I don't believe him. Yes, sorry.
I don't think you've met him, no. Well,
I think we're getting some messages. I think we're supposed to do something here. I'm not sure what we're supposed to do.
You're okay. I just popped back in, and so when she's done talking about her middle grade book, we'll just do some audience Q&A, but you're okay. No worries.
Well, the mythical Marcus is a child psychiatrist, and he always says to parents, unplug your kids. Get them outdoors, get them out into the wild. And so that's what this book is really encouraging kids to unplug. And it's
good. That's great.
Good. I call it Lord of the Flies without the violence.
Oh, good. Oh, good. That was...
Yeah. I love that. That's a great log line. So I want to let everybody know who's watching us right now that those of you who've been active in the chat, maybe you have a question that you'd like to ask either one of these lovely authors here. And the first one actually leads us really nicely into talking about the Islanders, of what is the biggest difference and biggest challenge in writing for kids versus writing for adults?
Oh, anyone who thinks writing for kids is easy has never done a good job, I think. It's you have a full, rich story, characters, pathos, just like you do with an adult novel. It's language, attention spans, realizing that length, but the use of pacing for, you don't want a kid to say, this is boring, which my grandson was my first editor. And he actually read the beginning and went, it's kind of slow. So back to work. I went back to work. He likes it now. And so it is.
It's good to have honest reviewers, and they're hard to find, but your grandson sounds
my grandson, boring. So, but now he loves it. So I was my toughest critic. And I think that it's a real sensitivity to making all the senses come alive. Even more so, I think. I do it with adults, and Delia, you have to. But with kids, it's really critical to bring that world up front and so that they are in it. Otherwise, that's why I think they like fantasy worlds a lot. And yet I want to show them that you don't need to, as much as I love fantasy, I want to show them how gorgeous and great, mystical and fabulous the wild is.
Yes, the wild.
And Delia, that's why I love Delia.
Yeah, look at the nature and you think, you couldn't make this stuff up.
No, exactly. What's really magical is in the wild.
Lightning, bugs, fireflies, the praying mantis, and how they behave.
Watching a mother owl defend her nest and with a mother osprey, there's some violence there. It's everything you want, and nature is something to be marveled at and not be afraid of. Not be afraid.
Yeah, and I love that, and it goes along with the unplugging that your husband was talking about, your mythical husband. But this also leads into another nice question very nicely, and I think it applies to both of you. Where do you rank setting on level of importance when thinking about a book? Is it more important than characters, plot? How valuable do you see setting when writing a book?
Delia, you take that one first.
I think setting is very important. In my book, Where the Crawdads Sing, is especially important. The setting itself, the marsh, is a character, very much a very strong character throughout the book. And so, for example, the story is of a young girl who is abandoned by most of her family. There were always some adults a little bit in the background, but she had to survive in the marsh largely alone. And so the setting had to be a place where that was realistic. If I had based the book in the mountains of Idaho, there'd be too much snow and she'd freeze. It would have been impossible. So I had to choose a setting where it was a temperate climate. A child really could live in that in those temperatures. There really is food lying around. Oysters and mussels can be collected, and she knew how to fish, so that was possible. Grits were cheap in those days. So the setting had to be practical, but it also, to me, she learned, because she was abandoned, she had to learn from nature. And nature was all around her. So she had to be out in a place where she was somewhat isolated, and she actually learned how to survive, how to eat. She learned from the ravens how to collect mussels, things like that. So the setting was a main part of the book.
I agree. I think what you said about the setting being part of the character, is a character in the novel, is absolutely true. And I love that idea of nature as a teacher. Yes. You know, again, it's dangerous, but also benevolent. And what I've done in the same way is I set my books as a backdrop with a species that I've studied. And I like to draw my themes from what I've learned. So rather than archetypal themes to create a story, which is what I had done, when I changed my process, I thought, how can I make this story world authentic and real and breathing, so I don't have to proselytize, like Delia said. And it was by bringing out the themes of what I learned from the species. And then from that, you create those characteristics for your characters. And dialogue, you have words to play with. You can, I was talking about how you can have a setting, the same exact stretch of beach. And if a woman loves the ocean and has a warm relationship with it, she'll see that ocean as her friend, as someone she can trust. You take another woman, the same stretch of beach through her point of view. If that ocean killed her husband or her son, she sees the gray-tipped waves and the harsh crashing, and she sees something she doesn't trust. So nature comes alive through the characters.
Yes.
And setting.
Well,
I think that's what did you say?
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask another question, but we love your insight on it as well. If you have something to add to what Mary Alice said.
I was going to say, we are part of nature. People too often think that there's nature and then there's us. We are part of nature. We are animals. If we might not want to think about it that way, but we are. And when you do live in nature by choice or because you have to, you do learn from it and you feel part of it. You
It's the
definitely feel
feeling.
like you are part of it. And I
Right.
love that. I lived in the wilderness for many years of my life, and I very much felt connected and part of it. And it's so interesting to see people when they get back into nature, they feel like they've come home. Part of them comes alive. They don't even realize what they've missed. Why do so many people go to parks? Why do so many people go to the lake or go to the beach? Why do they love seeing the gulls? I mean, it is a big part of us, and it makes us feel at home.
And that's what I think disease is, and it's a dis-ease. They are uncomfortable and they don't even know why, they're looking at the nature and the world through glass, most people, and especially in cities. So you need to it doesn't have to be absolutely the wild, but get out to a park, get out to some place in your backyard where you can, that's why I say know the names of the trees. At that big bird up there, it's not a big brown bird, it's a red-tailed hawk.
Yeah.
And knowing the name of it will help you to feel part and connected, like Delia said, and I also love that idea of vista. In a lot of my books, I have my characters stand and look at the vista, where especially over the ocean or the mountaintops, when there's almost no seen difference between the sky and the earth. And I always say it connects you to a higher power. It connects you to something bigger than yourself. And if you can pull that inside of you, then you can take that strength and deal with whatever problems you have, post-pandemic or whatever.
Yes.
I love it. I love that. And I hate the idea of even stopping this conversation. We're hitting up against some time here, but we have time for this one last question here, which again flows so nicely. I'm obsessed with how this journey is taking us on. But you talk about nature being a teacher, but I think we also learn a lot from books and from other people and those experiences that we have. So what did this book, The Summer of Lost and Found, teach you? Or Delia, for you as a reader, and for Mary Alice, you as a writer?
Clearly for me, it was to live each day, to enjoy the moment, and to not always plan what's going to happen. Because there's a scene where she's about ready to walk out on the beach, and in the morning, the beach is always untrammeled. It's beautiful and crisp. And it's that consciousness of, I'm going to step onto this. So it's a choice that we have. How am I going to live this day? What decisions am I going to make? And because you're leaving a personal legacy behind. And I think that's what I learned. I'm so grateful to be healthy with this all, we did it.
What I got from it, which is similar, but what I got, my big takeaway was that no matter how bad things are, you can fill your heart. You can fill your life with your friends and loved ones, and things might be bad all around, and you're not going to change that. In some situations, you're not going to change that. But it's amazing how the human spirit can find even small ways to fill your life.
And now I'm emotional. Both of those answers were gorgeous and beautiful. And I think that you can find those lessons and many more in Mary Alice Monroe's new book, The Summer of Lost and Found, which is what we're celebrating here tonight. And if you're one of the 4 people living under a rock that hasn't read What the Crawdads Sing yet, you can also get copies of that one as well. It is both books are incredible in their own ways. And it's been such an honor on a personal note to hear the two of you speak and your wise words, and the fact that you have the courage during this pandemic to share wonderful stories with us, Mary Alice, and we're so excited, Delia, for more stories from you as well. I know I'm not alone in that, so thank you both.
Well, thank you.
Okay, now Delia, we're going to get together and brainstorm, because we got to work on that next book.
we're both talking about problems for the next one, so we got to get together and.
Well, I do want to give you each the opportunity to remind people who you are, where they can find you online, and anything else that you want to say before we close out this evening. And Delia, if you don't mind starting, we'll end with Mary Alice here.
I'm Delia Owens, author of Where the Crawdads Sing, and I'm on Instagram, author Delia Owens. I'm on, I have a website, deliaowens.com. So come and visit. I'd love to have you join Instagram. I was not a social media person at all, but I am now.
And we can follow the movie updates on your Instagram. I've been like a hound watching. And I'm Mary Alice Monroe, and you can find me on my website, newly designed. I'm quite proud of it, maryalicemonroe.com. And my Instagram is Mary Alice Monroe, and on Facebook at Mary Alice Monroe author page, and also on Friends in Fiction, which is that great group on Wednesday nights at 7:00. And we were honored to have Delia join us, one of our early, very first guests. And we didn't freeze.
We got through the whole Zoom with no freezing. It's wonderful. Yay. You all did great. The knocks on wood helped. And I'm McKaylee with Tattered Cover Bookstore in Denver, Colorado. And we want to say thank you so much. For some of you watching us right now, it's getting close to dinner time. Maybe consider shopping and ordering from a local mom and pop restaurant. Local businesses are a heart and soul of your communities. And we cannot thank you enough for your support, especially over this global crisis that we all have been facing. So thank you for continuing to do that. Ladies, if you'll stick around while I just close this out here.
All right,
we've been celebrating the Summer of Lost and Found by Mary Alice Monroe, which you can get your copies of at tatteredcover.com or at any one of our locations. We thank you all so much for joining us this evening. Stay safe, everybody, and happy reading. Good night, all.
Bye.